She came into our lives like a storm dressed in calm. My girlfriend had been complaining about her body for weeks, standing in front of the mirror with a quiet fury, tugging at her waist, frowning at her thighs, sighing with the kind of bitterness that seeped into everything. She said she needed to feel strong again, needed to take control. I offered her every reassurance I could, but some things can't be touched by words. And so she hired a personal trainer. I didn't argue. I thought it was harmless, even healthy. I had no idea what she was inviting into our home. Her name was Ava, 25, maybe younger, though her body spoke a language that didn't belong to youth alone. There was nothing childish about her. When she walked in that first morning, with her duffel bag slung over one shoulder and her hair pulled into a high ponytail that bounced with every step, I felt something shift in the air. She smiled easily, like she was already familiar with the space, with us. She wasn't loud, not flashy, but she had presence, the kind that demands attention without asking for it. I watched my girlfriend's face light up with curiosity, maybe admiration, and I told myself not to read into it. She unrolled her mat in our living room, right between the couch and the window, and began the session like she'd done it 1,000 times. Her voice was low, steady, patient. Her hands moved with confidence, adjusting posture, guiding breath. I sat in the kitchen at first, pretending to scroll through emails, but my eyes kept drifting. The way Ava moved was like liquid strength, every muscle defined, but never stiff. She touched my girlfriend's arm to correct the angle, her hip to align the balance, her lower back to ease the tension. Each time she did, my girlfriend shivered slightly, the way someone does when they're startled by their own skin. I noticed it. I noticed everything. I joined them the next session, mostly out of curiosity. Ava invited me to participate with a smile, and I told myself I was being supportive. She positioned me next to my girlfriend, our mats barely touching. She walked between us, her bare feet soundless on the wood floor, her presence constant, her focus divided but exact. She corrected my form with the same grace, the same warmth, her fingers brushing my shoulder, my waist, the curve of my spine. Each touch was professional, but it lingered in my mind long after her hands had moved on. The workouts weren't complicated, basic strength, controlled movement, synchronized breath, but they became something else entirely under her guidance. I wasn't just stretching. I was being watched, read, understood. I could feel her gaze on me when I held a pose too long. I could feel the pulse in my throat quicken when she crouched beside me, demonstrating emotion with fluid clarity. My girlfriend watched her too, but in a different way. There was a softness in her expression I hadn't seen in a while, a kind of surrender. I wondered if she saw what I saw. Soon, Ava became a fixture in our routine. Mornings belonged to her. The living room transformed into a space that hummed with energy, with sweat, with something unspeakable but undeniable. She brought resistance bands and yoga blocks and tiny towels that smelled like citrus and eucalyptus. She moved through our home like she belonged there. She greeted us with warmth, left us with encouragement, and in between, she occupied every inch of air. There were moments that stayed with me, too fleeting to hold, too potent to ignore. A hand on my thigh, steadying me. Her fingers ghosting over my lower stomach as she adjusted my posture. The way her body curved behind mine, just a breath apart when she demonstrated a stretch. She didn't flirt, not obviously. She didn't need to. It was her control that seduced, her ease, the way she filled silence with presence. I could feel myself being pulled in, slowly, imperceptibly, like the tide pulling back sand. My girlfriend thrived under her attention. She moved differently, held herself with more confidence, smiled more in the mornings. And yet, there was a tension building, something I couldn't name but felt in my bones. Ava would arrive in fitted leggings and cropped tops that clung to her like second skin. I tried not to notice. I tried harder not to compare. But my eyes betrayed me every time. We began stretching longer after sessions. The three of us would sit in the golden spill of sunlight from the window, bodies cooling, muscles trembling, sweat drying in slow patterns on our skin. Ava would lean back on her palms, her face serene, her shirt clinging to her torso. My girlfriend would lie flat on her mat, breathing deep, eyes closed, a soft smile on her lips. I would sit between them, pulse steady on the outside, but quick and disoriented within. I told myself it was harmless, just exercise, just admiration, just the natural intimacy of shared discipline. But somewhere under that calm logic, I felt something twisting. I couldn't tell if it was desire or fear or both. All I knew was that Ava had changed the rhythm of our home. She had entered it through invitation, yes, but now she occupied more than just the hours we gave her. She was in the air, in the breath, in the space between me and the woman I loved, and I wasn't sure who she was training anymore. It became a rhythm before I even noticed it. The three of us every morning, like a ritual carved into the bones of the house. I would wake to the sound of clinking cups in the kitchen, the creak of the front door as Ava arrived, her soft laugh carrying through the walls. My girlfriend's voice followed, a little higher, a little more awake than I ever heard it with me alone. I'd rise slowly, dress in something that suggested effort without revealing too much, and meet them in the living room, where the mats were already unrolled and the music was already playing low in the background. Ava moved through the space like she owned it, not arrogantly, but confidently, as if she had memorized the floor plan of our lives and now walked it with certainty. She greeted me with a nod, a glance that felt like it held more than just good morning. My girlfriend smiled at me, already slightly flushed, already caught up in the glow that seemed to follow Ava everywhere. I felt like I was stepping into something that had started before I arrived, even though I knew it hadn't. We stretched together, moved together, breathed together. Inhale, hold, exhale. 3 sets of lungs, 3 bodies in varying states of sweat and tension, aligned in a choreography that felt increasingly intimate. Ava's hands moved easily between us, correcting form, encouraging engagement, guiding us deeper. She touched my girlfriend's thigh and mine in the same breath. Her fingers lingered just long enough to make me feel something that wasn't entirely about the stretch. When I caught her eye mid-movement, she didn't look away. She held my gaze, steady and unreadable, until my focus slipped and I forgot which muscle I was supposed to be controlling. The proximity became natural, then necessary. Our mats gradually inched closer together. Our legs brushed during floor work. Our arms tangled during partner stretches. There were moments, quick, subtle, when her breath mixed with mine as she bent over me, correcting the angle of my spine, her voice barely above a whisper, her skin so close I could feel the heat radiating off it. It was in those seconds that the edges between us began to blur. After the workouts, no one rushed to shower. Instead, we sat on the floor, cooling down in soft silence or easy laughter. Ava would lean back on her elbows, stretching out like a cat in sunlight, her shirt damp with sweat and clinging to her ribs. My girlfriend would lie on her back, one arm over her eyes, smiling up at nothing. I'd sit somewhere in between, my body humming with exertion, my mind pulsing with questions I couldn't ask. There was a closeness that felt heavier than endorphins, like gravity had changed its rules in that room. It didn't stop when Ava left. My girlfriend would be different after she was gone, looser, more alive. She'd sing while making breakfast, sway her hips as she passed me in the hallway, brush her fingers against my back without meaning to. I'd catch her staring at her phone, smiling at messages she didn't offer to share. And when I asked if everything was okay, she'd say yes too quickly, too easily, her eyes darting away like a fish slipping through water. There were moments I caught them in glances that felt charged, private. sitting close on the couch, shoulders pressed together, knees barely separated. Their laughter would rise and fall like a shared breath, something practiced, rehearsed. I'd be in the kitchen pretending not to notice, pretending the knot in my stomach was just indigestion. But every touch I saw, every flicker of eye contact, every soft laugh felt like a breadcrumb trail I wasn't meant to follow. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that I was projecting, that I was older, insecure, reading too much into small things. But insecurity has a way of creeping into everything, even love, especially love. I started watching more closely, counting the seconds they spent in physical contact, measuring the space between them when they sat together, comparing it to the space they left for me. And the more I watched, the more I saw it, the subtle shift. The way Ava leaned in when my girlfriend spoke, the way my girlfriend mirrored her body language without realizing it. But the most dangerous moments were the ones that didn't include me at all. When I'd come home from errands and find them sitting on the floor, mats rolled up, their bodies still glistening with sweat. They'd look up at me, guilty but trying not to show it, and I'd smile like nothing was wrong. I'd go to the bedroom, change into something comfortable, and sit in silence, waiting for the sound of their footsteps in the hallway, for some proof that I still belonged in this dynamic we'd all allowed to happen. At night, the boundaries dissolved even more. We'd sit on the couch after dinner, watching shows we barely paid attention to. Sometimes all three of us, sometimes just two. I'd feel her leg press into mine, then feel Ava's weight settle on the other side, close enough that the heat of her skin touched my arm. Sometimes we shared a blanket. Sometimes we didn't need to. The air itself felt thick with something unsaid. I started to notice my own reactions, the way I dressed when Ava was coming over, the way I suddenly became more conscious of my posture, of the way my shirt clung to my chest when I bent over, of the way my breath caught when she stood behind me and adjusted my hips during a squat. I was drawn to her. I knew it. I hated it, but I wanted it, and I couldn't tell if she knew, or worse, if she wanted me to. The balance between us had shifted into something fragile, something constantly on the verge of tipping. I couldn't tell if we were becoming more connected or slowly coming apart. But every breath we shared in that living room, every synchronized movement, every lingering touch, it all felt like a rehearsal for something bigger, something inevitable, something that had already begun the moment we all stepped onto those mats together. I didn't know if I was part of a game or if I had become the game, but I kept showing up, kept stretching beside them, kept breathing with them, because no matter how uncertain everything felt, I wasn't ready to stop. Not yet. Not while there was still warmth in the room. Not while the rhythm still held us all in its quiet, dangerous embrace. It was a Saturday, one of those slow, golden afternoons that blurred the line between day and night. The air was warm with late sun, filtering through the curtains in long strips across the floor. We had just finished a longer session than usual, an hour and a half of movement, sweat, and something else that lingered just beneath the surface. My muscles were loose, pleasantly aching. My skin was damp, my shirt clinging in places I wasn't entirely comfortable with, but I stayed there, on the mat, grounded by something I couldn't yet name. Ava lay stretched out on the rug, arms over her head, her body curved in an elegant arc that made it difficult to look away. My girlfriend sat cross-legged beside her, absently twirling the hem of her tank top, her eyes glazed over in post-workout calm. I watched them both from across the room, leaning against the edge of the couch, heart still thudding in its own rhythm. There was wine in the kitchen, leftover from a recent dinner party we hadn't bothered to clean up after. My girlfriend suggested we open it. Ava didn't hesitate. The bottle was uncorked, the glasses filled, and suddenly the space around us softened even more. We drank in silence at first, the kind of silence that feels chosen, not accidental. The living room smelled like sweat and citrus, skin and fabric. I could still hear our breaths, our bodies settling after movement, like echoes in the walls. The wine tasted sweeter than I remembered, or maybe that was just my mouth, already loosened, already anticipating something I hadn't admitted even to myself. We talked, but not about anything important. A movie, a recipe, some joke from earlier in the week. But underneath the small talk, there was a charge. Ava's laugh came slower, deeper. My girlfriend's eyes lingered longer when she looked at her. And I felt a strange sensation building in my stomach. Not quite jealousy, not quite desire. A sharpness, a warning, a pull. I watched their knees touch, just barely, and then not so barely. I watched the way Ava leaned in to say something, how her hand landed on my girlfriend's thigh without fanfare, like it had always belonged there. And then she looked at me. I didn't look away. I couldn't. Her gaze was steady, open, but not innocent. It was a look that asked a question and already knew the answer. My chest tightened, not in fear, but anticipation. Something was shifting, and I could feel the floor tilt beneath me. My girlfriend reached out and touched my arm, a simple gesture, but the warmth of it traveled through my body like a wire conducting heat. I leaned into it, not knowing why, only that I didn't want to pull back. Ava rose to her knees slowly, her glass now empty, her body casting a long shadow across the rug. She moved closer. The space between us vanished without effort. She reached for my girlfriend's hand and guided it to her waist, then turned her eyes to me, her lips parted slightly, her breathing low. I felt like I had entered a dream, the kind where everything moves just a fraction too slow, where the light bends around bodies and time forgets how to count. I moved without thinking, like I had been waiting for this moment my whole life. I closed the distance between us and felt her skin under my hand, warm, alive, inviting. Her eyes fluttered closed as I touched her, and I heard the soft hitch of breath in her throat. My girlfriend reached for me at the same time, her fingers grazing the inside of my wrist, grounding me, drawing me in. The three of us were suddenly a single shape, tangled in limbs and breath, sweat and wine and silence. Clothing came off in slow waves, a shirt lifted over a head, a strap slipping down a shoulder, the sound of fabric brushing against skin. No one spoke. Words would have shattered it. My hands moved on instinct, learning curves I had only imagined, feeling the weight and warmth of bodies that had once belonged only to my peripheral thoughts. Ava kissed my shoulder, slow and deep, and my girlfriend pressed her mouth to my neck, teeth grazing skin in a way that made me gasp. It didn't feel wrong. It felt overdue. The couch wasn't enough, so we moved to the floor. Cushions, blankets, whatever was soft. I was between them, then beneath, then above. Ava's fingers tangled in my hair. My girlfriend's nails dragged down my back. The rhythm was slow at first, exploratory, reverent. Then it built, waves crashing against waves, hips moving in sync, breath stolen and returned. Every touch felt layered, every moan shared between us. I lost track of whose mouth was where, whose hands were holding me, whose thigh was pressed against mine. I only knew I didn't want it to stop. Time dissolved. The light changed. At some point, all I could feel was the thrum of my own heartbeat against the floor, the sound of breathing that wasn't mine, and the pulsing ache between my legs that refused to fade. Ava's mouth found places I hadn't let anyone explore in years. My girlfriend watched with parted lips, her eyes dark, her hands sliding over her own body as if echoing every sensation through me. When she joined us again, It was with a hunger I had never seen in her before, a kind of beautiful, quiet rage that made me tremble. I came undone beneath both of them, shattered open in a way that felt like being claimed. I cried out without shame, not just from pleasure, but from the realization that something had cracked, a line crossed, a part of me handed over. My body didn't lie. It welcomed them. It wanted this, all of it. After, we lay on the floor, tangled and breathless, body slick with sweat and cooling air. No one spoke. Ava's head rested on my stomach. My girlfriend's hand curled around my shoulder. My legs ached. My chest rose and fell like I had just run for miles. But I didn't move. I didn't want to. If I moved, I might have to admit what we'd done, what it meant, and I wasn't ready. Something had shifted that night, not just in our bodies, but in the shape of what we were. We had opened a door I wasn't sure could be closed, and as I lay there, caught between the heat of their skin and the chill of the hardwood beneath me, I realized I didn't know whether I had been invited in or lured. The morning after didn't feel like a reckoning. It felt like continuation, like an extension of the same breath we'd all exhaled together the night before. The light came in through the blinds in thin slices, falling across the hardwood and the tangle of cushions on the floor. Our bodies had long since separated, but the impression of them lingered, in the softness of the room, and the scent of sweat still woven into the fabric of the blankets, in the faint red imprint of a hand on my thigh. We moved slowly, without urgency, like people who had entered another atmosphere and didn't yet know how to adjust to the gravity. Ava left just before noon. She dressed without shame, her eyes calm and unreadable, her mouth set in a half smile that told me she wasn't worried. My girlfriend kissed her on the cheek, light and familiar, then walked her to the door. I sat on the couch pretending to scroll through my phone, watching their silhouettes in the hallway. Their movements were easy, too easy, and that's when it began. Not a sharp pain, but a quiet, pulling sensation deep in my stomach, the kind of unease that doesn't scream, but waits patiently behind your ribs. The day passed in small, delicate fragments. My girlfriend cleaned the kitchen with exaggerated focus. I folded laundry I didn't remember washing. We said nothing about the night before, but everything had changed. Her glances toward me were brief, calculated. She moved through the apartment with her usual rhythm, but it had a new weight to it, like every step was being measured for its distance from mine. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to hear the answers. That evening, as I undressed for a shower, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My body looked the same curves, same softness, same skin, but I didn't recognize myself. There were marks on my thighs, on my hips, a faint bruise under my breast where someone's teeth had lingered. My skin wasn't mine anymore. It was shared, remembered. I touched the places that still felt sore, and something like shame flickered in my chest, followed closely by something worse, desire. I stepped into the hot water and let it run down my back, but nothing washed away. The memory stayed embedded in my muscles, in the ache between my legs, in the way my fingers trembled when I touched my own skin. I tried to tell myself it was just sex, just exploration, a mistake maybe, but one born of curiosity, of human heat. And yet, underneath that story was another one, the version I didn't want to speak aloud, the version where I was no longer sure if I had been part of something spontaneous or something orchestrated. Later that night, she climbed into bed beside me like nothing had changed. She curled against me, draped her arm across my stomach, rested her face against my shoulder. I felt the heat of her breath on my collarbone and wondered if she was thinking about me or Ava. I lay still, letting her settle, pretending to be asleep long before I was. My eyes remained open, staring at the ceiling, tracing the same cracks in the plaster I had stared at during lonely nights before her. Now I was lonelier with her body pressed against mine than I had ever been alone. The next morning, I reached for her phone without thinking. It was impulsive, instinctive, like scratching an itch that had been growing in the dark. She was still in the shower, the sound of water masking my guilt. Her phone didn't have a lock. She had always been casual about that. I opened her messages, pretending my hands weren't shaking. I saw Ava's name immediately. The thread was long, intimate. I scrolled. The words blurred together. Jokes, encouragement, emojis that curled like smoke off the screen. And then I saw the photo. A mirror selfie. Ava in a sports bra and underwear, casual, posed, her hand resting just above the waistband, her lips slightly parted. Sent at midnight, after she'd gone home, after we had fallen asleep. My chest tightened like a fist around my lungs. I closed the app and set the phone back exactly where I found it. She came out of the shower minutes later, her hair dripping, her skin glowing, humming something low and tuneless. She didn't notice anything. Or maybe she did, but chose not to ask. I said nothing. I moved through the morning like a ghost wearing my own body. That afternoon, Ava arrived for the usual session. She was barefoot as always, leggings hugging her in a way that seemed intentional. She smiled at me, slow and quiet, like we were sharing something no one else could see. My girlfriend greeted her with a lightness I hadn't seen in days. Their laughter filled the space before I could even lay out my mat. I felt like furniture, present but unnoticed. The workout began like all the others, but I couldn't find my rhythm. My body didn't respond the same. I was too aware of where she was, how close her hands were to mine, how often her gaze slid across the room to check on my girlfriend. When she came to correct my posture, her fingers brushed my back and I flinched. It was subtle, but she noticed. She paused just long enough to let me feel it. I didn't meet her eyes. When the session ended, I made an excuse and left the room first. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the floor tiles, counting the seconds until I heard the front door click shut behind her. When I returned to the living room, my girlfriend was reclined on the couch, scrolling her phone. Her expression was unreadable. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for something, acknowledgement, apology, even confrontation. But she didn't look up. She just kept scrolling. That night, I sat at my vanity, brushing my hair out of habit. The mirror in front of me reflected everything. The woman I had become. The lines around my mouth that used to be smile lines. The curve of my shoulder, no longer as firm as it once was. I saw myself clearly for the first time in days, and the truth stung. I didn't know who I was in this equation anymore. The partner, the interloper, the experiment. I looked into my own eyes and saw something I didn't want to name, need. Behind me, the door opened. My girlfriend stepped into the room, said something casual I didn't hear, walked past me to the dresser. I watched her in the mirror, watched her move, watched her avoid my reflection. There were two of me now, the woman in the mirror and the one sitting in the chair. One was hollow. One was watching. Neither of them knew what to do next. The week that followed was filled with silences that didn't feel empty. They were full, dense like fog. I moved through the apartment with care, as though any sharp movement might rupture the delicate balance holding everything together. My girlfriend acted like nothing had changed, like the night on the floor hadn't happened, like the messages I wasn't supposed to see didn't exist. Her routines remained intact: morning smoothies, evening skincare, carefully curated playlists that hummed through the kitchen while she chopped fruit with the same rhythm as before. but the way she avoided my eyes when I passed behind her said enough. Something had changed, and she didn't want to name it. Ava still came, punctual, radiant, unbothered. She brought new bands, new routines, new little tools to enhance the sessions, foam rollers, sliders, scented oils. She never asked if I was okay, never checked the temperature of the room. Instead, she acted as though nothing had shifted, as though her mouth hadn't been between my legs a week ago, as though she hadn't watched my girlfriend stroke my body while whispering into hers. It was a power play, disguised as calm. She smiled at me like she knew exactly where my tension sat, and sometimes her fingers would find it, pressing just hard enough to remind me that she still could. We didn't talk, but we spoke through movements, glances, small and deliberate gestures that were louder than any words could have been. During one session, while demonstrating a modified lunge, Ava's hand rested on my lower back a beat too long. Not enough to be overt, just enough to be remembered. My girlfriend watched from across the mat, her eyes flicking between us, then looking away with a tightness in her jaw that hadn't been there before. That was when I knew she had seen something she hadn't expected. Not jealousy, not quite, but a realization, a shifting of weight. That night, she touched me in bed for the first time in days. Not affectionately, possessively. Her hand slid over my hip and pulled me closer. Her breath was hot on the back of my neck, and I didn't stop her. I let her do what she needed to feel in control again, but there was a detachment in my chest that startled me. My body moved, responded, even shuddered, but inside, I was watching from somewhere far away. I kept thinking of Ava's face, her steady hands, the way she had knelt behind me last session and placed her palms on either side of my ribs to guide my breath. That touch was still with me, and I hated how much I wanted it again. Over the next few days, the lines blurred further. My girlfriend invited Ava to stay after sessions. Sometimes it was just for tea, sometimes wine. The couch became a strange arena of proximity and subtle war. The three of us would sit close, but never quite close enough. Our thighs would touch, then separate. Our eyes would meet, then break. One night, Ava's knee grazed mine and stayed there. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. My girlfriend's eyes flicked down, then locked onto mine. We held that stare until Ava broke it with a question about something on TV, pretending not to notice that she had just lit a fuse between us. I found myself changing, dressing differently for workouts, choosing tighter tops, slower movements. I told myself it was about control, about reclaiming something that had been taken, but it wasn't. It was about attention. It was about being seen by both of them. I craved the friction of their gaze, the invisible heat of knowing I was wanted, even if no one said it aloud. Then there was the night my girlfriend asked Ava to stay for dinner. She cooked something elaborate, set the table with candles, like we were hosting a guest and not someone who had already tasted both of us. The evening was quiet, punctuated by long pauses and longer glances. At one point, Ava leaned forward to pour more wine into my glass, her fingers brushing mine in a way that felt intentional. I didn't move. My girlfriend saw. Her lips pressed into a line, but she said nothing. After Ava left, the silence between us turned sharp. My girlfriend stood in the kitchen, scrubbing the same dish over and over. I watched her from the doorway, waiting for the inevitable confrontation, but it never came. Instead, she walked past me, brushing my shoulder with hers. It wasn't an apology. It was a challenge. That night, she kissed me hard, with teeth, with pressure, as though she was trying to erase something from my mouth. I let her. I kissed her back. I gripped her hips. I clawed her spine. And when she cried out, I wasn't sure if it was from pleasure or pain or something in between. The following morning, I found myself alone in the apartment. I wandered into the living room and sat on the same rug where everything had started. I stared at the floor, at the grain of the wood, at the sunlight coming in through the window. My fingers touched the fibers beneath me, remembering. I lay back slowly, breathing in the silence. I closed my eyes and let my body remember every gesture. Ava's hands, my girlfriend's breath, the way it felt when we stopped pretending, the way it felt when we all pretended again. I didn't know what I wanted, not really, but I knew what I didn't want, to return to what we were before. Something had broken open inside me, and no amount of denial could close it again. I wanted to be touched. I wanted to be seen. I wanted the chaos, even if it hurt, even if it twisted us into something unrecognizable. The quiet no longer comforted me. It tempted me. And in that stillness, I finally understood. I was no longer reaching for resolution. I was reaching for fire. The shift didn't come with drama. It didn't explode, didn't announce itself in loud arguments or slamming doors. It arrived quietly, like humidity, something you didn't notice until it had soaked into everything. One morning, I found myself watching the two of them make coffee together, Ava barefoot in one of my oversized t-shirts, my girlfriend stirring oat milk into both mugs. They moved around each other seamlessly, almost gracefully. I stood in the hallway, frozen in the frame of the doorway, and for the first time, I saw it. Not possibility, not play, possession. Ava's eyes flicked up and met mine for just a second. There was no guilt there, just certainty. She didn't flinch or pull away from the closeness she shared with my girlfriend, and my girlfriend didn't move either. She didn't try to explain with her eyes or soften the moment. They just looked at me, and I realized they had been looking past me for days. I stopped joining the sessions. At first, I told myself I was busy, then tired, then sore. Eventually, I stopped making excuses. I'd sit on the balcony during their sessions and listen to the muted thump of the playlist, the occasional burst of laughter, the sound of Ava's voice instructing, affirming, owning the room I used to share. When I returned inside, the space smelled like skin and eucalyptus. I'd step around their yoga mats like intrusions and pretend not to notice how the cushions on the couch were always slightly askew, how the glasses still held fingerprints from hands that no longer reached for mine. Then came the night I returned home earlier than expected. It was dark inside. The lights were low, the air thick with warmth and the trace of lavender oil. I walked into the bedroom and they were there. Not shocked, not scrambling, just tangled. My girlfriend looked at me and didn't speak. Ava turned her head and rested her chin on my girlfriend's shoulder like she belonged there. And maybe she did. Maybe I had made that bed without knowing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took a long breath and stepped backward, closing the door softly behind me. The next morning, no one mentioned it. My girlfriend handed me my coffee like always. Ava stayed a little longer than usual, her presence quieter now, but still commanding. I felt like a guest in my own home, like a placeholder being gradually erased. That weekend, I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know if I was coming back. I stood in the doorway with my keys in my hand and waited for someone to stop me. No one did. Ava looked up from her phone and nodded once, as if to say, finally. My girlfriend barely looked away from the TV. I checked into a quiet hotel across town. The room was sterile, the bed too white, the silence too clean. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every touch, every glance, every shift that led to this moment. I tried to recall the last time my girlfriend had said my name with softness. I couldn't. And yet, in the strange vacuum of that hotel room, something inside me unfurled. Not grief, not rage, but clarity. I realized I had been holding on to an idea of us that had expired long before Ava ever entered the picture. I had clung to the ritual, the comfort, the familiarity. I had mistaken routine for connection. And Ava, whatever she represented, had simply exposed the rot beneath the surface. I stayed away for 3 days. No one called. When I returned, I didn't knock. I walked in and found them on the couch, legs tangled, a shared blanket draped lazily over their laps. They looked up. I didn't speak. I walked past them into the bedroom and gathered the rest of my things. Shoes, books, the sweater I used to wear on cold mornings that now hung in her closet, smelling faintly of someone else. When I turned to leave, my girlfriend stood in the hallway. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I waited. Nothing came. I brushed past her and reached the door. As I opened it, Ava spoke. Just one sentence. Low, steady, unapologetic. It wasn't cruel, but it was a closure I hadn't expected. Outside, the wind felt sharper than I remembered. I walked to the car without looking back. The house behind me had already become something else, something I had no place in. Weeks passed, then months. I moved into a new apartment, smaller, quieter. I filled it with plants and books and silence. And sometimes, late at night, I would think about that final moment, about the way they had looked at me, not with hatred or love, but with a strange, wordless mercy. I learned to breathe again without them, but sometimes, in the quiet just before sleep, I could still feel Ava's hand on my back, steadying me in a lunge, guiding me forward. And sometimes, in that same darkness, I hated how much I missed the feeling of being touched like I belonged to someone. And once, just once, I caught myself whispering her name into my pillow. Not in longing, not in pain, but in recognition. Because what I lost was never just a lover. It was the illusion that I could ever be enough for someone who had already decided to give herself away.